Cybersecurity State Coordinator for CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I've been with CISA for 4 years now. Prior to that, I was with the Department of Administration there at the state as the at the time I was the Policy and Risk Management Bureau Chief for SITSD, and then prior to that, I was the Enterprise Security Manager, AKA. So lots of different hats there within DOA. I see some familiar names on the list here, so very excited to be a part of this call, talking about technology acquisition and cybersecurity in and around of. So with that, I'll pass it over to Travis for a quick introduction as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So Travis Light, I'm, as Natalie mentioned, the cybersecurity advisor for CISA here in Montana. Both Joe and I are part of the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and belong to Region 8. But both of us, we're from Montana. Joe mentioned he worked for the state prior to this role. I've been with CISA for about 2 years prior to that. I spent 9 years full-time with the Montana National Guard. And really our area of responsibility is Montana, which is great. And with that, Joe, just making sure, are you able to see my slides?
I can, yes.
Okay, awesome. Then I'll turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Yeah, next slide, please. And so, today's agenda, a little roadmap. This one's kind of easy for me today. I'm just going to be doing the intro to CISA and a little bit about CISA, and then I'm going to pass it over to Travis for all of the rest, the threat environment, kind of setting up the scope of why it's important for secure data or hardware, secure software acquisition. So, and then we have lots of resources. These slides will be shared at the very end of the presentation, as will we have a whole bunch of links for you as well. So you don't have to worry about trying to keep up or do research while we're speaking. And like Natalie was saying, feel free to ask questions as we're going along, and we'll answer those the best that we possibly can. Next slide, please. So just quickly, a little bit about CISA in itself. What is our mission, our vision here? Just like the slide says, we lead the national effort to understand, manage, and reduce the risk to cyber, both in critical infrastructure, both in the cyber and physical realms. And so, we connect the stakeholders in industry to provide awareness, briefings such as this, training resources, we have plenty of those, and assessments, those type of things, to both private and public entities. Next slide. Just a little bit about what this slide encompasses so much of what Travis and I do on a day-to-day basis. The first one, the partnership development in itself, and to getting to know what is critical infrastructure in our nation, in our region, and in Montana in particular. So that partnership development through the state and locals and other critical infrastructure within our state. And sharing of information and that data sharing, that's very much a part of what we do, working with our stakeholders. And risk assessments and analysis, we do plenty of different types of assessments. We'll get into some of those, the strategic and technical side of assessments that CISA can do, both from a protective security advisors as well as CISA's cybersecurity advisors. And then we all have, CISA has a number of agencies, but one of those is that emergency communications as well. We'll get into that here in a little bit.
Within the crystal core of a king could allow Bobby's cultivation to increase dramatically.
Is there a question?
No, I think someone needs to mute their audiobook out there.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you.
I was thinking that would be an interesting question of I was trying to formulate something. So next slide. Yeah, thank you. A little bit more about who we are. So there's talked a little bit about the three different regions of divisions within. There's the cybersecurity part of CISA, obviously the protective security advisors or the infrastructure security. And then there's the emergency communications. The National Risk Management Center, they produce so much of the white papers, the things that we, the security alerts, those things that are discussed and pushed out by the physical and the cyber. And next slide, please. And here is a list of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors throughout the nation, and including in Montana. From the chemical to commerce to dam sectors, at least for state procurement, that is in state government, and that includes K through 12 through higher education, state of Montana, local governments. Those all would be under that government facilities sector here that's highlighted. From each of these sectors has a sector coordinating councils, where private sector entities coordinate with the government on critical infrastructure protection activities and issues. So normally they have different groups and settings within each of these sectors as well. Next slide.
And just to give some background there, when you're looking at this slide in those 16 sectors, the difference between Joe's role and my role is that Joe, as the state coordinator, is focused on government facilities. I get the other 15 sectors, which sounds like it's kind of unbalanced there until you realize that is all state agencies, all counties, all local governments, cities, municipalities, and everything within those. Add K through 12 schools and higher education, and all of a sudden that's a little more balanced.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. To the right there is a sector risk management agency, and they're kind of the lead federal agency for that sector. And like Joe said, each has a sector coordinating council that's meant to be a collaboration between federal government, state government, and then private sector too. And there's a reason that we'll get to later why that is important to mention. With that, though, I'll turn it back over, Joe.
No, great points. It's just different, identifying the different roles between what Travis and I do, on our focus day to day. But at the same time, we both work together, as with our partners on the protective security advisor side, and really do a lot of assessments together, both from a cyber and physical assessments. Yeah. So here's on the slide, just kind of a broken out CISA, by regions. These particular regions follow the same sectors as Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. All of the regional offices are in the same locations, often very close within proximity to work with our FEMA partners on whether it's natural disasters or a cyber event, those type of things. We can work very closely. You can see CISA Region 8 consists of the 6 states: Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. And a little bit about our cadre here in Montana. Travis and I are both in Helena. We have a protective security advisor also in Helena, and then we also have another protective security advisor in Billings. Next slide. And with that, I'd actually just toss it over to Travis.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks Joe. Background on our agency, what we do there, and really how we're working with you and why we're here talking to you today. So I'll be covering, we'll start with kind of the threat environment. Joe mentioned at the beginning, sort of some ideas, some case studies for why this kind of material is important, why procurement needs to think about supply chain risks and supply chain protections for software and hardware. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. And then going through CISA's Secure by Design campaign, some of the guidance that we've published for acquiring software, should be software and hardware acquisition, and then covering some resources at the end. This is a first for us to actually have a presentation for that's just focused on procurement. So please give us feedback, good or bad. This was great. This maybe wasn't as applicable to what we do, but yeah, let's see how this goes. Start kind of with worldwide threat assessment, and we kind of refer to these as the big four nation state cyber actors. Each one has a varied approach to disruptment and utilization of their cyber forces. You might hear of advanced persistent threats. We'll get to one here in just a moment, that are either, maybe they are the state. I think the DOJ back in November indicted some Russian operatives and said, yes, you're this exact cyber threat. We are saying that is GRU at this point. Sometimes they're not as closely affiliated with the nation state, with their government, as we see with maybe some Iranian affiliated hacktivist groups that might have some funding or might have some direction from their government, but maybe they're not as closely tied. But anyway, you see some background there. Again, Russia, China, or the PRC, Iran, North Korea, and then non-state affiliated actors. Maybe they're hacktivist groups or ransomware groups that are looking to make some money, etc. We do maintain pages on each one of those. We will have that link in that handout at the end, but we maintain pages on all alerts and advisories that are related to those specific nation state cyber actors. One that we've seen recently, and recently being the last really 2 years, huge focus on the People's Republic of China. And you can see that there's a lot of joint advisories published lately that are focused on the PRC leveraging living off the land techniques. You may have seen some reporting in the media about how they've been getting into critical infrastructure, the targeting of community lifelines that all the other sectors rely on, communications, energy, water, transportation. They've also been targeting communications a lot lately. You may have heard stories about how cyber threat actors have compromised probably just about every telecom here in the last 6 months. There was an advisory put out by joint CISA and FBI back in December saying, hey, don't use unencrypted common text messaging anymore. Rely on something that uses end-to-end encryption, like the tools built into Apple and Android devices. Use something like Signal or WhatsApp, but please stop using just unencrypted SMS text messages. It's because of the threat posed and the activities that we've observed from the PRC. They tend to use, and by they, I mean not, this slide says PRC, but really we see commonalities across all of those nation states. But they typically take advantage of known vulnerabilities. They're not cooking something up that's brand new, that's never been seen before. You can see each of these CVEs, or common vulnerabilities and exposures. That second number in each one of these specifies a year. We've seen them using, for example, that first one, Sophos Firewall. That's a known vulnerability from 2022 that they're still using effectively because folks haven't patched. Same with, you can see it across these different platforms. Do want to caveat for this entire presentation, none of this is meant to disparage or promote any one or several vendors or platforms or products over one another. These are all just informational. But the takeaway here is that in general, the threat actors are using known vulnerabilities that are out there. And part of what this presentation is about is how can you, from the procurement standpoint, what can you kind of do about that? That maybe IT is going to have their own things to do. IT is going to provide patches and things, but what can we do, either in contract language or reviewing to make decisions between, whose proposal are we accepting here, maybe help you make some decisions that are based around that platform's cybersecurity. So first case study that I'll use that kind of put supply chain cybersecurity on everyone's radar was the 2020 data breach of the federal government and really everybody. It was a supply chain attack, most likely by a Russian affiliated threat actor that compromised Microsoft cloud services. SolarWinds Orion service. SolarWinds was the one that made it in the news the most, despite the fact that really they targeted Microsoft, SolarWinds, and VMware. But really, you can see those the quotes that I grabbed from Microsoft and from F-Secure. Hey, from a software engineering perspective, this was almost certainly the largest and most sophisticated attack the world's ever seen. It was all of 2020. Basically, threat actors were able to compromise SolarWinds itself. They were able to get in and alter the code that then customers, and by customers, we're talking just about every federal government organization, most state governments. I'm sure that state of Montana was using SolarWinds. I know the Montana National Guard was using SolarWinds at the time. Really, you'd go as a customer to SolarWinds to get that trusted patch. Turns out that that patch was poisoned itself. So really, there's this question of what are we doing to secure our supply chain? And to give you an idea, really that entire year, starting no later than December 2019 and going at least until December of 2020, the threat actor was able to access basically any and all traffic. Data, the most sensitive data, anything sent in emails inside of those companies, mostly because SolarWinds and Microsoft, your administrators use those services. And so it's anything that, the most critical data, the crown jewels were compromised as part of that. So got to consider your vendor's cyber posture as well as your own. And again, just wrapping up, that was kind of the first time I know for me personally and a lot of us gave any thought to supply chain.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Travis, comment in the chat was CrowdStrike got us stuck in Philly. Yeah, just to make a comment on that, that was not actually a nation state or anybody. That was a procedure done from CrowdStrike itself. But it does speak to supply chain and pushing out procedures for technology and updating software such as CrowdStrike. But it wasn't a nation state attack.
Nope, not an attack at all, but definitely something. Are we considering what kind of reliance we have on our supply chain? And that's a perfect example of a disruption that wasn't caused by a threat actor, that wasn't malicious at all, that still had major impacts. I do see Amanda has her hand up.
Sorry, that CrowdStrike comment was mine.
Sure.
I was trying to be funny. And yeah, it was very concerning about what all services are handled by the exact same supplier and how just a simple update caused so many systems to go down.
Yeah, I think that kind of
interconnections and questions, right? About, but do we even know what we're relying on and how secure and resilient it is? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the just really the supply chain itself of what moving to cloud-based services and what those might be and that somewhat, do they have the proper procedures in place? And so many vendors do have checks and balances where CrowdStrike, and I can tell you right now, CrowdStrike does have those procedures in place to prevent this in the future because they don't want to tank their own company. But it's a good lesson for all of those vendors that provide those cloud services. So sorry that you got stuck in Philly on that one.
Yeah, that's no good. And probably also worth mentioning, CrowdStrike's reputation took a hit, and they probably lost some customers. They probably didn't lose most of their customers. I know SolarWinds and Microsoft VMware, as a result of this 2020 breach, they didn't lose most of their customers. So there is that question. So we'll kind of go into some of the things that you can do that, especially either from state of Montana or even like state of Montana with other states, can kind of leverage here too, and some of what CISA is doing about it. So real quick, want to mention Change Healthcare last year. Change Healthcare is a subsidiary of United Healthcare, processes 14 billion claims a year, and that's authorizations, prescriptions, that sort of thing. Process those payments for those hospitals. They got hit with ransomware last spring, and quick survey afterwards, 94% of hospitals were affected, and 40% of those reported disruptions in patient care. So the hospitals weren't hit. A subsidiary of an insurance claims processor was hit, and it still had those downstream effects, where honestly, a lot of hospitals were wondering, if we're missing these payments, how are we going to keep the doors open? I also have that clip over there on the right. It affected military readiness. That military pharmacies weren't able to process claims for soldiers and dependents because United Healthcare was disrupted by a cyber attack. It was so bad that United Health had to work with Health and Human Services at the federal level to establish relief programs for hospitals and providers. The ransom itself, they paid $22 million roughly, but the cost of the breach that compromised roughly 190 million Americans, that cost at least $2.5 billion. And I'm pretty sure that number is on the low side, because I'm not sure, what the economic disruption was. So $2.5 billion at least. Takeaway there is, again, just like with CrowdStrike, what's the impact to your operations of a cyber incident that would disrupt the services you rely on? Real quick too, just while we're talking about sort of some supply chain examples, there is the FCC's covered equipment list. This is something that was established, I believe, for the first time in the late 2010s, added to as recently as last year. But FCC maintains a list of equipment and services deemed to pose an unacceptable risk to the national security of the U.S. Some of these you may have never heard of. Some of them you might, because we've encountered some stakeholders in Montana that are still using these. And so these are, we don't tend to disparage companies. I already kind of put that caveat out there. This is maybe the exception to say, hey, don't use Huawei, Hikvision, Kaspersky at this point. Those are all on FCC's covered list, and they can't sell to not just U.S. government, but like a U.S. person at this point. So it's something to consider and reference from time to time. So what are we doing about this? What's CISA doing? And Joe, did you have something?
Oh, I was just going to mention that link. We have a link to that in the. Yep, we'll share that at the very end. Yep, very good.
Almost, if you see it on a slide, we probably have a link to it. All right, so CISA has really approached cybersecurity from the manufacturer, from the vendor's standpoint, leveraging this secure by design concept that, hey, software vendors, can you build products that can reasonably protect against cyber actors successfully gaining access to your product? And really what we did was we took a page out of back in the 80s, the Unsafe at Any Speed campaign, to kind of put the security or the safety of vehicles more on the vehicle manufacturers, rather than blaming individual drivers for bad things that happened. Seat belts, airbags, backup cams, etc., all are there by default. Safety features enabled by default at that point. So we took that concept and applied it to this campaign. Hey, can we encourage software vendors to design their products secure out of the box and secure by default, without added charge? Make sure that those safety features, those security features, are enabled by default, and make sure that customers have to opt out of them rather than to opt into them. And aware, kind of like that alarm in your car when you're driving without a seatbelt on. We want that, but for when you're turning secure software features off. So the last piece of that is secure by demand. And that's helping you understand that you can have expectations, especially from the procurement side. You can have expectations for the software and products to be secure, and to have that written when you're putting out RFPs, when you're actually signing contracts, when you're evaluating different providers, make sure that you're demanding that they're providing you with kind of this baseline of cybersecurity before you put ink to paper.
We did have a quick question.
Yes.
Is Secure by Design a certification for the software or hardware, and should we be asking for this information?
Sure. So that's actually about to be answered in the next few slides, kind of what that is. Secure by Design itself is a voluntary pledge that enterprise software vendors will make good faith efforts towards these 7 goals within 1 year of when they sign that pledge. And we'll get to kind of what that looks like here in a minute. So it's not a certification yet, but we'll go through those 7 goals first. We want them to increase adoption of multi-factor authentication, have it available everywhere that they can. Alternatives to using default passwords. We've seen an awful lot of attacks against, again, those community lifeline sectors, energy, water, wastewater, transportation. We've seen a lot just leverage stakeholders using default passwords. So basically they take it out of the box. The manual that anybody can go online to find has the default password, and people aren't making that change. So encouraging vendors instead to eliminate that as an option. Hey, let's have a way to have default passwords or one-time passwords that you can use when you're setting up that device or software rather than default passwords. Eliminating entire classes of vulnerability. I won't go too much into the weeds on what that is, but really, hey, we're seeing this thing that's a known bad practice, not even a best practice, but a known bad practice. These are like the top 10 worst things you can do. Let's maybe shy away from those if you're a signer of this pledge. Demonstrate what you're doing to encourage customers to patch your products, to actually apply those security patches. Publish a vulnerability disclosure policy, preferably available to the public on your website. Increase transparency in reporting vulnerabilities, and enable your customers to more easily find evidence of intrusions. So those are the 7 goals that are part of the pledge. We have right now, as of when I took the screenshot Monday, 283 companies that are on board. You'll notice that it is alphabetical, and it only goes to C because I wasn't going to put all 283 companies on here. We have a link here that will provide to this, so you can check, hey, the manufacturers you're working with, have they signed that pledge yet? We also maintain a page of each of those companies' progress reports. So you can see on there, hey, what's Cloudflare doing now that they've signed the pledge to meet those 7 goals? What progress are they making towards those? So hopefully that answers the question. Let me know if it didn't.
Yeah, the other second question follow-up was, should we be asking for this information? And I'm not sure if I think at least being aware of, do they follow these Secure by Design methodologies? Are they on this list? You can ask them, but I think most of the vendors, not all of your vendors, are going to be signing up for this. And so, but if they do state and come forth, we are a Secure by Design company, we have our products meet these requirements, it is something for you to take a note of, and we're always going to leverage or encourage the purchase of the more secure product if they're equal in all parts, and in meaning a product, 2 different products, but one says they're secure by design, we encourage that to go by that more secure by default design.
Yeah, so it's absolutely a question you could ask. First, check to see if they're on there, and if they're not, ask them why, or ask them if they're familiar with the Secure by Design pledge, if they're familiar with the program, the campaign, and encourage them to either sign it or to take steps towards those goals. That's actually part of this Secure by Demand guide, and again, just about all of these have plenty of pages behind them that will provide the links to at the end if you want to go digging for more. But This is a joint publication by us and by FBI, saying, hey, these are some of the things you can request from a vendor to kind of validate their cybersecurity before you even, but as part of the proposal process. These are things you can request: a software bill of materials, the secure software development attestation form, response to the controls listed in the software acquisition guide, and roadmaps towards those secure by design pledge goals. Now, you're probably already asking yourself, what are those things? That's the whole next step of the presentation. So we'll get into what those things are. Things you might already be able to find without requesting it from them. Again, if they've published a vulnerability disclosure policy on their website, I'll show where you can go to find a repository of the already submitted attestation forms. And then again, checking to see if they have already taken that pledge and if they're listed on our site. All right, and I promised we'll explain what a software bill of materials is, and that's up next. It's actually going to be a short video here, so without further ado, let me switch over here to the video and make sure that everyone can see and hear that. Are you able to at least see it right now? Thumbs up.
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. I'm going to hit play. See what happens.
It's working.
Do you know what's in that cake?
Of course I do. It's on the back of the box. Oh, there's something wrong.
Do we know which version of the software this is running?
A software bill of materials, otherwise known as an SBOM, is an inventory of all the different components in a piece of software that provides greater transparency about potential risks or vulnerabilities. Why does this matter? A more comprehensive understanding of the different parts of a whole makes it easier to evaluate risks and take action to mitigate disaster before it happens.
Thankfully, the SBOM told us which version we were running, and we could respond more quickly and easily, before that turned sideways.
How does it work? An SBOM is a formal record containing the details and supply chain relationships of various components used in building software. Essentially, a list of ingredients for software that is created during development and is machine readable and easily processed via automation. A bill of materials is commonly found in manufacturing, and it only makes sense to apply this same rigor to the software supply chain. Having a full inventory of those parts enables better visibility and risk management. By having greater awareness of your inventory, potential vulnerabilities can be quickly addressed as they're discovered. Adversaries often exploit those vulnerable parts. It's hard to claim that you have a secure development process if you're not tracking your components. Supply chain transparency is key. And if you want to know what's under the hood, an SBOM will greatly help you conduct comprehensive risk analysis. Then, when a new vulnerability arises, you can respond quickly and efficiently. Even if there's just a potential risk, you can take mitigating actions.
Thanks for catching that. If we didn't have an SBOM, we could have lost the company thousands of staff hours, and that's a lot of dollars and cents.
The benefits are multi-tiered. In addition to better managing vulnerabilities and enhancing productivity, an SBOM can help customers manage risk by identifying the source of components. It empowers the developer and producer with increased recallability, and it can track the chain of custody in a more comprehensive and effective way. Beyond vulnerabilities, SBOM-driven transparency can help organizations understand risks such as licensing requirements, compliance rules, and developer security and maintenance practices. All of this leads to better security, less risk, more accountability, transparency, and ultimately a more consistent and reliable product, which means greater consumer trust. Security is a team sport. While SBOM is not a new concept, it has only really taken root more recently. To institute it as a standard best practice across a wide swath of industries will require community engagement. This should be a community-led effort. It's not something government can readily solve on its own. The path forward has to be shaped by integrating the perspectives of the developer, the consumer, and those who choose software. It should reflect new software practices as well as those challenged by complex legacy systems. This common vision can traverse all industries with the understanding that each industry and organization will make the SBOM process uniquely theirs. The path forward. We have the basics today, and we can get started on implementation. Meanwhile, we can work on enhancing and refining SBOM practices, generation, consumption, and key edge cases, as well as integrating SBOM processes into existing security practices. Tools are a key part of this. One way we're doing this is through DHS S&T's Silicon Valley Innovation Program's partnership with startups to energize the market with SBOM-enabled software supply chain visibility tools. Future iterations of these tools and services build on lessons from the community that will further address specific needs across the very diverse software ecosystem by advancing and enhancing the data captured and shared, integrating that data into related security and quality processes and practices, and implementing transparency for large and complex legacy systems and organizations.
What can you do to help advance this effort? Well, there are 3 things. First, start asking for SBOMs from your suppliers today. Second, think about what it would take for you and your team to generate SBOMs from your own software and what tools are available. And lastly, join us. Learn about how CISA is enhancing and refining SBOM technology and practices.
Visit cisa.gov/SBOM or email us if you have questions at sbom@cisa.dhs.gov.
All right, so the main takeaway there isn't that you need to be generating SBOMs. Really, I imagine most of everybody on the call is probably not involved, and their organizations probably aren't developing their own software. So in general, it's really that first bullet. Start asking for SBOMs from your suppliers today. Hey, all right, so here you're bidding on this RFP. Where's your SBOM? This is kind of the takeaway there. So we're focusing right now on software, but of course there's the hardware counterpart of a hardware bill of materials, similar concept. The SBOM itself follows a framework that lets it be automated. The hardware bill of materials is still kind of getting there, but we do have this framework that's published for hardware bill of materials and supply chain risk management. You'll notice up there in the upper right that CISA worked on that with 2 of those sector coordinating councils I mentioned all the way back at the beginning, the communication sector and IT sector. So again, those coordinating councils are public-private partnership. Each of those sectors maintains their own boards that have usually representation from CISA and several other federal agencies, but then also plenty from the private sector too, so that it's not just the federal government kind of coming up with whatever we think they should follow, but really input from the people we would be publishing this guidance for. The framework itself, again, published by those coordinating councils, and really that framework provides consistent approach and language for vendors and customers, common taxonomy, common language for everybody, and helps categorize hardware bill of material use cases and how they fit laws, rules, regulations for compliance, how they fit for security and help reduce risk exposure, and then availability, going back to maybe not the CrowdStrike, but going back to the COVID days, resistance to disruptions. So is your hardware resistant, or what's going to happen if the global supply chain's disrupted again? Let's talk about, are you reliant on that one widget that comes from one factory somewhere in the world that, I don't know, is going to be, unavailable to the United States here soon, or do you have resilience baked in there? But more in that framework guide if you're interested in exploring that. We also have a software acquisition guide. This one's going to probably be closer aligned to the actual contract language, maybe the closest thing in here to that. It is a collection of 77 checks, 77 controls across 5 different sections to assess how vendors align with secure by design principles. Each section is aligned with kind of the common software development lifecycle, and the sections are broken down into supplier governance and attestations, software supply chain, secure software development, secure software deployment, and vulnerability management. Now, you're probably already thinking, man, 77 controls sounds like way more than we need to be asking for. The good news is that several of those may be skipped. You kind of go through this questionnaire and it's got a flow to it. And you can see there on the right, if you answer yes to the governance control number 1, you can skip 25 different controls there. Same if you answer yes to question 2, you can skip another 7 of them. So 77 sounds more intimidating than it maybe actually is. But specifically that first one is if they've submitted a secure software development attestation form. And we'll get to what that is and what it looks like here in just a minute. Remember too that this is the guideline. You might go through the controls yourself and probably with your IT department and decide, do we really need to ask, do all 77 apply to what we're asking for? Do all 77 apply to us as an organization? All of this is guideline. It's actually one of my favorite things. Surprised it took this long to mention, but CISA is non-regulatory. So all of this is guidance and best practices.
Yeah, Travis, I think
sorry, we have a question.
that aligns. Oh, sorry, Natalie. I see that Dale Stout posted a question, and that aligns exactly with what you were just asking or just saying. His question is, how does this compare to a SOC 2 Type 2 report? And do the 77 controls align with the SOC 2 controls? And this is not like what you were saying. This is not an audit or, for compliance regulatory. So that SOC 2 would be regulatory. That would be a compliance piece. And these are recommendations, those controls. So that would be identifying the 2 different compares. Do they align? Yeah, somewhat. They would align back to probably that cybersecurity framework that can be, there is a crosswalk between the SOC 2 Type 2 and the cybersecurity framework. So with that, you could align those, Dale, and I hope that helps answer part of your question.
Probably a bit of feedback that I'll take too is how can we better align or how can we publicize if there is a crosswalk between SOC Type 2 and this software acquisition guide, certainly. So, yep, making a note for the future there. All right, so back to that development attestation form. It mentions equivalence, that GSA form 7700 that honestly I haven't really dug into. Or you can use a plan of actions and milestones with them. But the attestation form itself allows software producers to attest there's actually like 2 pages that they're saying, yes, our product meets these, or how we're addressing maybe the gaps between what we're attesting to and where we're at today. Didn't include section, I think it's 3 on here that includes all of those attestations, but it does align with NIST's, both the secure software development framework and the software supply chain security guidance. This is something that's required for software used by federal agencies and is there for awareness for everybody else. So again, when we're talking, since you're not a federal agency, this is nice to have, or like something that we encourage, but is not a requirement. That said, rather than making all of your vendors go and sign this form, there is repository for what already exists out there. It is CISA's repository for software attestations and artifacts. This is the one thing that's part of this presentation that you need to request an account for. Super easy. You're just entering your name, I think you enter your agency, your email address, justification, and really that doesn't have to be longer than a sentence or 2. Hey, I'm such and such with this, and this is why I want access to the repo, and then you submit it. Super easy. Turnaround time for creating that account is usually within 24 hours. You can see once you log in here, you've got up in the upper left, you've got tabs for software records, any artifacts that they've submitted, and the attestations themselves. It makes it a lot easier than going through forms for each and every product. You can see that very first link there, 10 different tenable products. Yep, we attested to it across these 10. All right, so kind of pivot a little bit to what FedRAMP is, and with that, I've actually got another video.
The Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, FedRAMP, promotes the adoption of secure cloud services across the U.S. government, providing a standardized approach to security assessments for cloud service offerings. FedRAMP creates a partnership between the federal government and industry. Together, we modernize IT infrastructure while protecting federal information. Before FedRAMP, vendors had to meet different security requirements for each federal agency. FedRAMP eliminates this duplication by providing a common security framework, making it possible for agencies and cloud service providers to reuse authorizations. Agencies review a standardized set of security materials against one common baseline. A cloud service offering is authorized once, and then the security package can be used by any federal agency. FedRAMP's guiding principle is reuse. Do once, use many times. This saves money, time, and effort for both agencies and cloud service providers.
So FedRAMP's not going to apply to anybody on here. I hope that in general, you won't have to work through the FedRAMP process, but you'll see why I've included it here in just a moment. Got another video here.
Once a service offering enters the authorization phase, it may be listed on the FedRAMP Marketplace. The Marketplace is the definitive source for FedRAMP authorized service offerings, and where you can search and sort through the database to find cloud services that are available for government-wide use. There are 3 designations that a cloud service offering can be listed as: ready, in process, and authorized. FedRAMP Ready is a designation that indicates that a 3PAO attests to a CSO's security capabilities, and a readiness assessment report has been reviewed and deemed acceptable. In process is a designation provided to CSPs that are actively working towards a FedRAMP authorization with either the JAB or a federal agency. FedRAMP Authorized is the designation that confirms the successful completion of the FedRAMP authorization process. The FedRAMP Marketplace also lists the accredited assessors that can perform the FedRAMP assessment. Visit marketplace.fedramp.gov to learn more.
All right, so a few things from that video. So they threw a few acronyms out at you without explaining what those acronyms meant. I've got a glossary here on that next slide. When they say CSO or CSP, that's a cloud service offering from a cloud service provider. The JAB is a joint authorization board, and a 3PAO is a third-party assessment organization. The takeaway for this, though, is that FedRAMP is really the federal government's approach to authorizing cloud services for use by the federal government. If you've heard of FISMA, this is literally FISMA for the cloud. What the main takeaway, though, here is that marketplace that you can go on. This does not require having an account. You can go on and see who's actually gone through that approval process. And it is it's tight. I have a friend of mine who's on the National Guard cyber defense team, whose full-time job is FedRAMP compliance for his company, and it's a hurdle to get through. What's neat about this is you can go on the marketplace and see who's completed that process or who's submitted for that process too. So check your vendors against that site, and you'll probably have a pretty good idea of who's already complying. Similar concept as FedRAMP, though. Here's just a screenshot of what FedRAMP looks like. You can see where they're at in this process: FedRAMP authorized, FedRAMP in process, et cetera, et cetera. But what's neat is around 2020, bunch of people got together and said, hey, what if we took this same FedRAMP concept and applied it to state procurement? It's a little different. FedRAMP's actually part of the US government. State RAMP is not. It is a 501c6 nonprofit membership organization that's organized kind of like a Chamber of Commerce is. I'm sure plenty of people on this call are more familiar with that than I am. But similar mission, focus on state and local government and education procurement. They maintain an approved product list similar to the FedRAMP Marketplace, 332 members of State RAMP, but as of when I checked this week, none are in Montana. So something to at least consider exploring and signing up for, even if you don't, though. the state ramp authorized product list is available. It looks a lot like that FedRAMP marketplace. There is a lot of overlap here, and you'll see we've got this in here too, just to compare. Both require that third-party assessment audit. State ramp has a fast track for things that are already FedRAMP approved, and state ramp provisionally authorizes those who submit packages a lot earlier and easier than FedRAMP does. Same concept though. All right, I know we're kind of short on time. Just a couple of CISA resources here at the end. What Joe and I do is a lot of offering both assessments and then technical services to stakeholders across Montana. The main one that I have highlighted is the vulnerability scanning. If you are part of the state of Montana here on this call, you're already enrolled. CISA has been working with state of Montana since at least 2018 at this point. They've leveraged most of our services at this point. We meet with them all the time. If you are not, though, I want to highlight everything on here is free. The vulnerability scanning's one of the best things that your organization can sign up with, a little out of the procurement lane, but it's external vulnerability scanning by Nessus. You can see what the rest of the internet sees about your network. Anything that touches the internet. The other thing, again, if you're not part of the state of Montana, reach out to us and we can schedule assessments. We usually start with the cyber performance goals, 38 questions. Again, assessment, not an audit. Nothing we do is regulatory in nature. Definitely just a good gap analysis to kind of hit the cybersecurity 101 in your environment. Usually procurement's part of this, and actually these kinds of assessments are what led to us being here today, but they are more focused on your IT team. And in that case, this is just information to take to them. Joe mentioned at the front end, so we're the two cyber advisors for the state. We also have two protective security advisors who are able to come to your location and walk through what the physical security looks like there. They like to say guns, gates, and guards, camera systems, door controls, that sort of thing. So we've got contact information for all four of us here at the end. And with that, still got a few minutes there, Natalie, for questions at the end.
Yeah, Amanda asked, is there a process or template of questions we should look out during this solicitation for SOC1 or SOC2?
So there are some of these, and I'll see if I can make it more clear too. Those controls are good questions to ask. There are kind of like subset questions if you don't want to go through all 77 of them. But hey, here are the kind of the controls, and let the vendor maybe review and ask them. Joe, did you have a better answer than I did?
Yeah, you know, I just know that the SOC 1 is more financial focused. SOC 2 does have some, you know, cybersecurity questions, you know, and more about the program itself. So, is there certain questions? I don't have that answer. I think the best answer would be those that are in this a lot more space than I am, and that is the policy and risk management team at Department of Administration. And I would ask them that exact question: what do they see from a day-to-day basis? That's I know I'm deflecting that, but we saw enough of those, and rely on that team, you know, to help on certain questions. It should be very helpful.
It does help if I'm actually typing that. Hey, so I see a question in there. Can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? You sure can. Dropping it in the chat right now.
Thank you so much.
And the same for the links. Yeah. You know,
yeah, Joe,
I did want to go
do you
back
have that,
to.
or I can grab it real quick.
Oh,
here we go.
You got it as well?
Yep, I do. I do.
Okay, perfect. Going back to Dale Stout's earlier question, I hate to jump back so far back on that software acquisition guide, but within that guide, there is a FedRAMP mapping, which also includes NIST 853 security controls, and those which can be, you know, mapped directly back to the cybersecurity framework. So there's a little bit further answer for you, Dale.
One question I have that's sort of related to what was just being discussed. You know, our contract templates have language when it comes to these security frameworks, that most of our contractors are required to provide or have available annual assurance statements, um, basically to demonstrate that they're compliant with these protocols. Is that fairly commonly understood language if we were to go to vendors and ask for those assurance statements?
I'm not sure of the language that you're referring to, but there are things such as, I mean, talked a little bit about state ramp, fed ramp, and then there's also star reports
Okay.
for cloud infrastructure, and it would be a self attestation. Or, I mean, you can ask if if they don't have anything. Um, I've seen where it's been asked have you had a CISA assessment or a NIST-based assessment, and would you be willing to share some of that information on your security program, not on the details, because they're probably
Right.
not going to be. It's kind of like the SOC 2 report a little bit. But you could ask for those, or if you're unsure, don't hesitate on saying, hey, would you mind having, you can always refer them to a CISA CSA and say, hey, would you mind having an assessment with them and kind of going through your cybersecurity program and providing a attestation to that, or I mean, at least the first couple pages of those reports to show that they have taken and they're taking steps to having a program that's ongoing, that's continuously improving their cybersecurity posture.
Okay. That's a perfect answer. I appreciate that.
Right, Natalie, I just hit send on those, so we should be able to get those in PDF form to everybody shortly.
They're traveling through the internet, but I will drop them in this Teams chat and make sure they're available to everyone. Any more questions out there? Well, this has been super educational, and I so appreciate y'all's time. Let's see. Can we get information to help new companies register for the design pledge?
Yes, contact information for how to sign up for the Secure by Design pledge. We do have that link in there, and let me see if I can grab that while everyone's patiently waiting.
Anybody else? Well, we appreciate y'all so much, and also to everyone still on the call. If you have suggestions for a monthly webinar, a topic you'd like us to research and present, or someone you'd like me to get a hold of, just go ahead and shoot me an email or a Teams message. And thank y'all so much.
Yeah, I'm dropping that it really starts with an email address to encourage them to take the pledge, and it starts just by emailing this here.
Perfect.
There we go. What do you know? It's Secure by Design. It says